As Chris said, my name is Alta. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for DVIP. I don't have the clicker, so I am going to ask for patience and grace. I think I'm in a good space for that
I
here.
think you may have the clicker.
Do I? Oh.
Yeah. Here,
Oh.
you may.
I may have the clicker. Perfect. Okay. How many of you are familiar with DVIP? I like to get a reading of the room. You guys have been working with our agency for a long, long time. So excellent, about half. Wonderful. Thank you for supporting our work for the last 43 years. So those of you that are not familiar with DVIP or the Domestic Violence Intervention Program, we have, this is our mission, right, is to provide safety and dignity always for victim survivors. Let's see how this works.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so for those of you that maybe were familiar with us in 1979, we started our work here in Johnson County out of the Women's Resource and Action Center. And from there, we have grown. So over the last 43 years, our service region has more than doubled. For those of you, we've got the map here that shows us sort of what that looks like, but that essentially means that we are all the way down to Missouri and all the way over to Illinois. So we serve communities in rural Southeast Iowa, in addition to folks here in Johnson County directly. So, I thought I saw it. Click. I did. There we go. Okay, that's the close-up of it. So since 1997, 33 programs, we had 33 programs that served the state of Iowa in 1997. And as of now, we actually have 8 to cover the entire state of Iowa. So a question that often comes when you sort of look at that number and look at that realization is what happened. Funding cuts happened, reallocation of those dollars, and the great regionalization, as we call it, occurred in 2013, which is when we doubled our service region to cover those southern communities. So this is a number that is often shared from the CDC. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men are impacted by domestic violence in their lifetime. During my presentation, so during this slideshow, approximately 400 folks will be abused in the nation, and that number has not changed. When I first started doing this work as a staff person in 2017, I came across that statistic and was blown away by it. A lot has occurred over the last 43 years, but that number has not changed. So, that's funny spacing there. So as we sort of go through things, what does DVIP do? How do we help all of those individuals? We offer a variety of services. As you can see, this very long list, but to get a little bit of audience participation from in the room, I know y'all can read, but could you maybe shout out some of the things that stick out to you or that you already knew we did?
That last one, the state's only pet fostering program.
Yes, yep, and we will talk about Cooper's House in a little bit too. Anybody else sort of jumping out things?
The emergency shelter.
Yeah, our emergency shelter. So we have for that entire service region picture that I showed you, we have the only emergency shelter for victim survivors of intimate partner violence here in Iowa City. So if you are a victim in Keokuk, Iowa, Lee County area, it's an 1.5-hour drive. I've done it twice this week, actually. It's, so if you're working there and your emergency stay is here, that is a burden on victims, but we do house them. We also offer transitional housing. So we actually have an apartment in Keokuk and an apartment house in Burlington as well. So for folks that maybe aren't in that immediate crisis space, we're able to offer them some temporary shelter for up to 3 months in those locations while they rebuild their credit in their lives. We also have hotel stays, and we'll talk about that too.
24-hour domestic.
Yes, the 24-hour hotline. For those of you, I make it a promise to say our hotline number every chance I get. So that hotline is 800-373-1043. That is the #1 way that people access our services. So if you are concerned about a neighbor, a friend, a loved one, if you are in need of our services, that is the point in which you start to access those services. We're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, holidays, weekends, all of the time. And it is absolutely vital that those phones get answered. So we have the crisis line.
If I may ask,
Yes.
the people staffing that hotline, what is their credentials?
Yeah, so the question for you all at home was, what are the credentials for those folks staffing our hotline? They're the same for our advocates that are working directly in person. Same credentials that I also have to have. So we are certified by the state, the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault. It is a process to go through. There's a lot of over 70 hours of shadowing in addition to online quizzes, and we have to renew our credentials every 2 years. So I have to continually get retrained, and especially with how technology and life evolves, that is absolutely vital for our advocates to stay on that cutting edge of that information. So they have that. We have, I'm going to ask, how many crisis line advocates do you think we have at DVIP, at Domestic Violence Intervention Program?
10?
10. I wish that were true. We have one.
Oh,
So we have a crisis line advocate. We do allow her to sleep and give her time off, I promise. And that is because of those funding cuts. So they directly impact services in big ways. What we do while we allow our crisis line advocate to sleep and have weekends is roll that over to the state. And so the state actually has sort of a hotline where folks answer when we're unable to, and then they contact our on-call tree. And we have about 32 full-time staff that work with us, and we all alternate those on-call duties. So we all get a little bit of sleep time.
You know, the sadness, and that's very sad when you hear the number of people that you have lived in, and you say, oh, cuts have been made. But what people must realize is that the governor of this state has millions and millions and millions of dollars that are being unused, that she has sort of in a storage, if you will. And I'm being very sincere.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars that are not being used.
Yeah.
And she just sort of keeping it stacked.
In her treasure
Here's this
chest.
crisis, and that's what needs. That's,
And we are not the only program in need. Certainly,
yeah, I'm sure.
all 8 programs in the state are. I will talk a little bit about funding, but we will sort of a couple other things. One, we have our support groups. So during COVID, we had to end our support groups for folks. We have been able to reopen those in the last month, and they have been wonderful. Absolutely a wonderful thing that our advocates are able to provide. We do peer-to-peer counseling, meaning that we meet with folks one-on-one. And then a number of other things, so safety planning, resource gathering, and then prevention education. I discovered if I can move it closer, it works. So, as I mentioned, we have the state's only, or our region's only emergency shelter here in Johnson County. The current location opened in 1993 and is a 40-bed unit. So that means we have 40 beds. There's 4 bunk beds to a room. The rooms are about 2 of my arm lengths wide, so tiny spaces. And we are full 365 days out of the year. We are constantly on a wait. And that is the truth. I just took a call last night and we are full. And then problem solving how we get that person to safety and keep them safe is a real issue. We divert or work with other programs and hotel stays for approximately 400 individuals every year seeking emergency shelter. We also offer mobile advocacy. So mobile advocacy is one of my very favorite things that we do. It is a very powerful thing in our rural communities or in small communities. We actually go to where victims feel safest. So for many folks that are forced to isolate with their abuser, they often don't have access to a phone or money or a car. there's a lot of barriers to them reaching out for help. And our advocates are able to meet them where they feel safest. So that might be after church on Sunday. That might look like going to the preschool where they drop their kids off because they're allowed to leave the house at that time. One of my favorite stories is actually one of our advocates shared with me that she had to start going grocery shopping on Tuesday evenings. I've shared this story a couple times. Have any of you heard it before? Oh, wonderful. I love that. So we had gotten a call. She was able to make a call from the school when she dropped her kids off, and we were able to find a time to meet her. The only time she was allowed to leave her home was on Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. to go grocery shopping. And he had timed it so he knew exactly how long it took for her to get to the grocery store, how long she had to shop, and how long she had to get home. She was given an allowance essentially to spend there. And our advocate worked with her to meet her at the grocery store. And so they would just be two women shopping in the grocery store, and they safety planned. They did this every week for about 2.5 months.
Wow.
To build a plan of safety. We got her a 911 phone, which is what we call our phones. They don't necessarily have to call 911, but it's a phone they can reach out to their advocates. It's not tracked and is completely safe for them to use. That individual was able to get to safety with her kiddos, and we were able to move through that process because we are flexible, because we're problem solvers, and can meet people where they feel the safest. And it's an incredibly impactful thing, especially in our smaller towns where everybody knows everything. Yeah, so we'll talk about that. So that's an example of removing those obstacles. So we'll sort of let you observe that. I talk about this stuff a lot, and as Chris said, we do have fun. I promise I'll get to some fun stories too. So one of the positives, so as I said, that individual was able to get to safety, and that is a remarkable thing. 68% of the clients we worked with in the last year have found permanent housing because of the work with our advocates. So that means we have helped them fill out rental applications. We have assisted them in filling out paperwork for funding support or keeping them in their own homes. And that is a remarkable number. It has continued to go up year after year, which is a wonderful thing for us to see. We touched on this, but I'll say it again. The average stay in our emergency shelter, so we are full 365 days out of the year. And the average stay is anywhere from 35 to 42 days. So if you take a moment and think about all of the pieces of your life, right? Your birth certificate, your social security card, your bank accounts, all of those sort of adulting things, right? That we have to navigate, food, work, car, gas. You have 42 days to figure out all of those pieces while also processing the trauma that you've experienced, and sometimes with your kids in a room that is about 2 arm lengths wide. So that is the very real part. The fact that they stay that long. One of the questions that I get and I hear a lot is, can they stay longer? Yes, we do extensions up to 60 days, but that's still only about 2 months to get all your pieces together. And honestly, it is a challenge, no matter how much time we're able to give them. Yes, Chris.
So 68% find permanent housing. What about the other 32%?
Yeah, the other 32%, sometimes we don't know. I will say that the hard part about this work is that we only get to see someone in the middle of their journey. We never get to really see them at the end, or hopefully we don't see them at the end. So some of them just leave. They move on. They go to a different state. They might travel home. They might go stay with a friend or family. That part, they don't have to necessarily tell us where they go. So some of them choose that. Some choose to go back. For folks that are in abusive situations, the most dangerous time is the 72 hours after they leave. And so we believe that individuals are the expert on their lives. They have kept themselves alive 100% of the time up to today. And so if going back is the safest option, we are there when they call us again. It takes about 7 times for an individual to leave an abusive situation for lots of different reasons, right? There's that safety component that I just talked about, but there's also the real economic impact as well. So red flags. Red flags of intimate partner abuse look a lot like, you know, relationships are, but excessive jealousy is one of them. I often encourage you guys to sort of shout out or raise your hand and name a couple of them that you know of things that maybe trigger in your head a situation or a reason to give pause.
Controlling money.
Controlling money, yes. 97% of victims have experienced financial or economic abuse. That's pretty much everybody.
And controlling their behavior, time.
Right.
Periods about world.
Yeah, controlling connections and time. Right? When we think about being able to make decisions for ourselves, how we spend our time and how we spend our money are two of the biggest things that we can do as a person. And that is one way to gain that control and keep people in a space of relying.
I find in my primary care that control of the contraceptive choices is a big one because they're, you know, when I'm saying, hey, let's put something that's good for 3 years, and the partner's like, oh, well, you know, and they're like, no, they'll come and like, no, my partner just wants me to be on a pill. Well, that's easy to be like, oh, where are your pills? Oh, you're pregnant again. You have to stay.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that's a big one.
Yeah, so for those online, she mentioned, we call it reproductive abuse. So controlling body choices. I would also stretch that to say other medical care as well. Controlling whether or not you have access to your medication, if you can purchase your medication. The Domestic Violence Intervention Program was awarded a grant about 6 months ago for a healthcare liaison position. And our healthcare liaison works with victims in accessing healthcare, but then also works with healthcare providers to help sort of ease that transition into, hey, I'm concerned about you. Here is a person that you can connect with at DVIP to get you that support, so that we can get those medications for folks, so that we can get maybe some testing done or different things like that. It is a very, very real thing that we have seen a huge increase at our emergency shelter. More than, we probably have 4 calls a month that come in for folks that are in need of special medical support in addition to the abuse that they've suffered. Sometimes the medical need is because of the abuse. Sometimes it is just a component of how they control. Other things that jump out to you.
Thing that I don't see there, but I think it's incorporated is isolation.
Yes, yeah, isolation is a big one. So controlling who you see and how you spend your time, right? Like if you have access to those support systems and people that say, I see you, I believe you. Obviously, a perpetrator is going to want to limit those, often isolating folks away from their families or friends that are supportive. During the pandemic, isolation was a huge piece of that. The intimate partner violence was coined the term the shadow pandemic by the World Health Organization because individuals were forced to isolate with their abuser. And how we access, how we support, how we get our hotline number into those folks' hands was a mind game puzzle for my team. So as the community engagement department, my goal is to get our name and number into as many hands as possible. Word of mouth is the #1 way that victims find out about services. They don't necessarily Google us. It's not actually that safe to do. And so we brainstormed lots of ways to get into people's homes during the pandemic without setting off any red flags for the abuser. And one of those was partnering with Chomp. They actually put our flyers and our hotline number in there to go food bags. So you would order food and just suddenly have our hotline number there with some different ways of needing help. We would also, we put an ad in the Bonnie Wire in the South, which is an ad that goes out to about 1,500 farmhouses throughout rural Southeast Iowa, which every single farm wife had said, you know, yeah, it comes and it sits on our coffee table for weeks. So that's where we put our number. So definitely getting creative. I'm always open to suggestions, so certainly email those to me. Any other pieces of that? Yeah.
No, mine's a little bit off that, but what about, family or friend members? If they are concerned about someone they know, can they call that number? And then how
Yes.
does that all work?
Yep, I got a whole slide on that. So the question for those of you at home was about how do friends and family support, and we will absolutely talk about that. If I can move my slide forward. There we go. So I'm gonna go. I like numbers. I like to track things and know what we're doing. In the past year, I'm so sorry about how that slide looks. We served 2,415 individuals throughout our entire service region in the past year with those 32 staff, which is an incredible amount and a lot of work on our advocates' part. In Johnson County, we served 1,486 individuals. So about, just over half are here, which makes sense. We are the most populous space that we serve. And we provided over 6,400 services to those folks. So when I say that, what does that mean? Because that number has actually doubled for us since the pandemic sort of ended, or we've moved into this new space post-pandemic. That number, those services mean we did safety planning right? So we did safety planning and got diapers and got housing assistance. We did some peer-to-peer support for the abuse and just talking through what the power and control wheel looks like, how to navigate some of those things. And we also helped make sure the kids were going to school. We got you coats and shoes, and so it's that doubling of services provided that has really been very striking. Since May of 2020, we've seen a 28% increase in our hotline calls. And in our rural communities, a number of those folks, we've seen anywhere from 151% increase in individuals reaching out. So the numbers continue to go up. And that is a thing that we're trying to figure out. We're really looking at those numbers and trying to dig a little deeper into what that means and how we can better support victims. So this is a story about Gretchen. So the slide talks about Gretchen, who obviously the names of victims are changed. They are not the real names to protect the confidentiality, but Gretchen had reached out to us a number of times and had nowhere to turn. She was brought here by her abuser, moved away from her family, as we sort of talked about that isolation piece, taking folks and putting them somewhere else where they have no support. She was able to call a number of times over the last few years. It actually started out as a message on Facebook. So during the pandemic, we saw a huge increase of folks reaching out in non-verbal ways. Because of technology constraints, we don't have a chat line, like a text chat line here locally, but the national level does. So a lot of folks end up using our Facebook page. That is not recommended, but I do encourage folks to follow our social media, but we don't encourage individuals to reach out because it is not safe. It is not a protected or confidential space to have those conversations. For individuals like Gretchen who were forced to start that process that way, we're able to connect her with one of our on-call advocates that she could chat with via text directly. And through that process, we were able to move her and her kids to safety at our emergency shelter. 98% of the individuals we serve feel safer, self-report that they feel safer because of their work with us. So that's problem solving around all of those different types of abuse that we talked about and really making a plan for each individual person. Everybody's life is different and all of the components that make up your life are impacted by domestic violence. And so we really have to look at all of those different pieces for folks. Any questions about that part? While I mess with the these numbers are hard for me. I'm a mom. I started out with DVIP 25 years ago as a volunteer in the youth department. I had to quit doing that when I had kids because it just was a little too much for my heart. But so I'll name that. I'll try not to cry. But a lot of times people think, I mean, it is horrible. Over 15.5 million children witness domestic violence in our nation a year, and that is too many, entirely millions too many. But the really beautiful part about our emergency shelter and our youth advocates is that it's kids' favorite place to go. It is not a scary place. It's sometimes the first time that kiddos have been able to actually be a kid. We really, really focus on supporting the parent with being a parent and allowing kids to be kids. So there's playing, there's a lot of conversations, a lot of experiences that kids that are victims of domestic violence don't often get to have, like going to the trampoline park or, building, carving pumpkins or doing those kid-like things. And so our youth department really focuses on allowing kids to be kids and processing with them through play therapy and different types of things. So a lot of times the kids just really, the one kid that I will forever carry in my heart, he was the first kid I worked with when I was 18 years old. He just wanted to have pizza. So I would go on Thursdays and bring pizza, and he just wanted to sit in my lap and we would eat pizza. And that was it. There was no talking. And it impacted my life hugely as the mother of two kids now, thinking about pizza. My kids will attest to the fact that anytime they ask for pizza, they 100% of the time get pizza. So they owe it to the young kid I worked with, but just how absolutely impactful it is to be there. So when we talk about supporting kids or supporting our program, showing up and being able to have those dollars and resources just to give really basic things. Another kiddo, his comfort food, his one thing he wanted more than anything was microwave popcorn. Food is very powerful, I think, with all of us, but especially with those kids who are looking for some of those consistent things or things that feel really magical, that are really just basic needs. Yeah.
One of the reasons why I mentioned that there's fun that happens there is because when pre-COVID, when we would make our deliveries we made them right to the shelter, and we would often hear the kids playing and having fun and laughing, and you knew that they were being well cared for and they were having fun.
Yeah, they have a lot of fun. It's definitely one of the better parts of the work. There's a lot of silliness, a lot of they got to have their face, since Halloween was not too long ago. We had a huge Halloween party. Kids in DV situations, especially within our emergency shelter, can't go trick-or-treating for obvious reasons. So we bring the trick-or-treating to them and decorate our youth department. They got to do this insane, amazing face painting with one of our youth advocates. And we have little gift bags. They have entirely too much candy and, all of the things. I will add one more thing about the kiddos. So our holiday store, I don't have a slide on this, but I'm going to share it. With the holidays coming up, we have about 10 different locations for folks to drop off new unwrapped gifts for our holiday store. We actually open a storefront by appointment only and allow the parent to come in and shop for free. So they get 3 large gifts, 3 small gifts, new pajamas, a pillowcase, and a blanket, and then all of the books that they could want per kid. Because having that magic is super, super important, and allowing parents to sort of be able to pick out those items, to have that dignity piece of the work that we do is really vital to just helping a family heal and support each other. And then our kids actually come in with the youth department and get to pick out a gift for their parent. So really a wonderful way that we can support those pieces for folks. But yeah, we have donation locations all throughout the community, and we served, I believe it was 33 families last year with that program. So Cooper's house was brought up a couple of times. So the story of Brent and Pepper. Brent had gotten Pepper as a gift from his parents, and Pepper was his, everything, his dog, his best friend. And Brent had been seeing a woman off and on for a number of years. And a lot of times people say, no, I've been abused. Do you help men? The answer is yes. Yes, we shelter men. Yes, men are abused. 4 in 10 men have experienced coercive control at some point in time in their life. The way that Brent was abused was actually because of Pepper. His girlfriend would kick Pepper down the stairs. She would lock Pepper out of the house. And in Iowa in the winter, that is an incredibly dangerous thing. It was after that very cold night in February that Brent was able to reach out to us. He had heard about us through his veterinary office, where we have Cooper's house brochures, that there was a program that would help him with Pepper and keeping Pepper safe, and in turn then keeping himself safe. 48% of victims report not leaving an abusive situation out of fear for their pet's safety. And so our advocates about 15 years ago started a fostering program where we actually would find foster homes for the animals. And then in May of 2017, we opened the state's only pet shelter within an emergency shelter called Cooper's House. We have housed everything and fostered everything from ostriches to bearded dragons to countless dogs and cats. We had a bird once, so lots of different creatures. I often say DVIP is an absolutely inclusive shelter because we will take all of your feathered and furred family members along with you as well. Getting the entire family to safety is absolutely vital. And animal abuse is the #1 indicator of child abuse in the house. So certainly lots of different avenues of why we have that program, and it is a huge, huge impact on victims' lives. Any questions about that? Yeah.
When you say children, what's the age range that you take in?
0 to 18.
18?
Yep. So back before I started this work, when I was a little girl, a lot of programs would only take kids up to 13. And that is, we have not operated that way because your 17-year-old child and then staying with your abusers is not good for anybody. And so we actually take the whole family in. We allow, the other question back in the early 80s, they didn't allow boys over the age of 13 for a long time. And if we are going to change the narrative around intimate partner violence, we absolutely have to talk about how it's impacting our young men. So we bring everybody.
So how do you service someone who's 19 living in that abusive family situation?
So they would be there. I mean, it depends on the situation, right? Like, are they also being abused? Because then they're a victim, and yes, they come. But they are an adult, so certainly they don't have to come.
There'd be other services.
Yeah, so we work a lot with United Action for Youth for our high schoolers, or if it is the high schooler that is, like if that's that teenager that is trying to get out of the house, and maybe the non-offending parent isn't moving or leaving. We work with UAY to support those kids as best as we can. But we certainly cannot take them in, anyone under the age of 18 without a parent. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is your goal to get the person back in the home again? Does that not work?
It really is up to the person, right? So that might not be the safest option. That might not be what the victim wants. If that's what the victim wants, then that's a different conversation. So it's really about doing safety planning. How can we support you in being as safe as possible? You don't have to utilize really any legal systems or anything like that to work with our advocates. And so we allow the victim to determine what is the best solution for their life. For some folks, it's a matter of perhaps there's multiple charges, right? Drug charges or various types of things. And we're housing them maybe for 3 or 4 days while law enforcement is picking up the offender, the perpetrator. And then we move them help them get back into their home and just sort of give them that safe space temporarily. And that is also an option, but
But if that doesn't work, what happens to, say, a 14-year-old?
I'm not sure what the question is. What happens to a 14-year-old?
You house them for how many days?
So we house the family for approximately 40 days, so just over a month. And we try to get them into permanent housing situations or look at what their options are.
But I guess I don't understand what that permanent housing would be if it wasn't back to where they came from.
It would be new housing, right? So it might be an apartment of their own. It might be a new community that they want to live in. A lot of folks maybe, you know, they live in West Branch and they move to Iowa City, or they live in Iowa City and they move somewhere else. So it really varies depending on the person and what their want is. But the permanent housing piece is getting them into their own space with funding to support that.
Away from their abuser.
But are these like group homes? There was somebody else?
They're still with their family.
So-
They're still with a parent or some guardian.
Yeah, it's like the kids and parent are all together when they move.
So this is an outside person that's causing the problem.
Well, no, it's not an outside person causing the problem. So generally, I mean, it can be, I guess I shouldn't say that. An abuser can be both, you know, a husband or a wife. I mean, it can be the parent, it could be a boyfriend or a step parent. It's not an outside person, but we can talk about that a little deeper too afterward. Oops, almost dropped my.
One more question on that. Do you partner, I know Shelter House has a number of apartment units that they've built in the last years. Do you partner with that group, or is that a housing option?
Yeah, so we, Shelter House, DVIP, Community, and a couple other groups, it's called Coordinated Entry. And they meet every Thursday morning. So we all receive funding. Well, we receive different pools of funding and then similar funding through HUD and that Emergency Solutions Grant, and there's another acronym there about housing that we sort of go through that lethality, the risk assessment. It's called a VI's SPDAT, and I am grateful I don't know what that acronym means or that is my decision, because I'm like, house them all is my answer. So they go through a process every week as interagencies and talk about the homelessness population and rapid rehousing and transitional housing and all of those different funding pools and what best fits which person. So yes, would be a shorter answer, but that's the reality is it's a very coordinated effort amongst all of us. So how to help a friend. There are so many words on this slide, and I promise I will send it out to you, and we have a whole flyer on it, and we have lots of conversations. But the gist of how to help a friend or a neighbor or member of your church is to be consistent, to say, I see you and I believe you. And then give them resources, give them our hotline number, give them the brochure, give them a tiny little itty bitty piece of paper that's really easy for them to hide with our hotline number on it. Those are all of the number one ways, is really to just say, hey, I'm noticing some things and I'm concerned. If you want, I'll sit with you while you call. If you are asking yourself, is this abuse? Is this not abuse? I don't know. There's some nuances around this that I feel like I really need to talk through. Call our 800 number. Our advocates are trained in offering different options and different solutions of how you have those conversations. So you don't have to be a victim to call our hotline. I know in my early 20s, I called for one of my friends because I was 20 and didn't know what to do. I just knew that it wasn't right that her boyfriend was coming over with a rifle. That's what I knew. And beyond that, I had no idea what to do. And so I called the hotline myself, even though I was a volunteer there, right? Anybody can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So all your slides should always have the hotline number.
Yeah.
So we can have a-
Right.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, the hotline is 800. Oh,
You're like-
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, she said all of my slides should have the 800 number on them. And you're right, they should. I try to. Sometimes I work on these late at night. Yeah, but our hotline is 800-373-1043. So how can you all as a community support victim survivors? One, you guys do an amazing job here at Gloria Dei. So I do want to just offer my gratitude for housing an in-kind donation drop-off location for, I believe, my entire life. I am the same age as the agency though, so I'm not sure if it's quite that long, but I feel like it probably is. I was one of the volunteers that would come and get it out of your coat closet before you gave us an actual room. But those in-kind donations are vital. Being able to provide different things for folks, you know, everything from a bag to put their stuff in, to shoes, to coats, to food. It all matters. And so thank you so much for being that. And there are lots of other ways too, right? Just saying you heard me speak, naming that this is a problem. The more that we shine light into these spaces where perpetrators are able to have control through secrecy and shame, we are able to move that conversation into a space of really being able to support victims. I have some stickers and chip clips and stuff that you are all welcome to help yourself to. There's also a bookmark up there that we created with recommended reading if you want to learn more about victim stories. Some more ways you can help. So sharing, we talked about. We are also starting victim support networks in our rural communities. So if you have contacts of people that you think, or churches that you think would be open to having this conversation and learning more about victim survivor services in their area, please let me know. I am always looking to make stronger connections within, you know, Iowa County, Van Buren County. So that'd be like Williamsburg, Keosauqua, Burlington, those types of areas. We certainly are always looking for ways to connect with people so that the more people that know about us, the more support we have, both for resources, but also helping to save lives. Social media, we are on all of the things, Instagram, Facebook, and we will be diving into TikTok this year. Don't ask me any questions about that. I don't know. I just said, okay.
I don't think this generation's gonna work.
Right? I know. It's my crowd. I'm with you. So sustainable giving, monthly giving is a huge support. So as I said, we talk about funding. We have taken, last year we took a 10% funding cut. In 2015, we took a 22% funding cut. So when you really start to look at that, we actually have taken another cut this year. We have not gotten the official numbers, but anywhere from 2 to 20%. So that volatile state federal funding is a really, really challenging thing. And as was mentioned earlier, that partisanship around funding of victim survivor services impacts us greatly. We are nonpartisan. I work with Joni Ernst. She actually voted to pass the PAUSE Act, which helps fund programs like Cooper's House across the country, which is wonderful. So it's not about being partisan, but at the same time, we have to start looking at our funding streams. And about 52% of our funding still comes from state and federal. It is expensive to run a 24-hour shelter and transitional housing and all of those things. The rest of it comes from community foundations, grants, individuals, and corporations, and really expanding that. So if an individual was to make a $35 to $75 a month donation, that actually goes to providing one night of safety. The higher end would be the hotel. The lower end is the shelter, emergency shelter. Yeah.
Ballpark, what would be your annual budget?
Our annual budget is $2.4 million. Wow. And we only have 30 staff. We are not making great, like that's not us. That's almost all direct aid in services. Yeah, other questions about funding or those funding streams?
What corporations are helping?
We have so many. I actually just got a check from Mid-American yesterday, or Friday. Today's Sunday. Okay. So, I forgot what day it was. So everywhere from like Mid-American to, you know, smaller like Linder Tire. does a lot of work for our victims. They actually are a sponsor of our Super Bowl fundraiser that we have in February. And they do that in-kind services to victim survivors' automobiles. So everything from those like tiny mom and pops to larger corporations. We update our list at the end of the year on our website of all of them. There are over 70 different businesses that support us. Other questions? Okay.
What is your success rate
What do you mean by success rate?
of the individuals that are being helped through your organization?
98% of them report feeling safer because of our work with us. So I would say that our success rate is 98%.
So they go on to lead normal lives, what we would call normal lives after that?
Oh. We don't get to know that part. So we only work with folks in the most immediate, hardest crisis part of their life. We often don't get to hear the good stories, the end of where they end up, because we are handling them in their crisis. I know that in my work, I get to go out and do conversations like this and have people come up and tell me their stories afterward, which are amazing and impactful. I get them. I'm the person that checks the mail, so I get to read letters of thank you and gratitude and hear things about people going off to law school and their kids are in high school or graduating and some of those types of things, which are really amazing. But I would say 75 to 85% of the time, we don't ever know.
Do you know what the average length of time that one of these individuals has to be helped and be living elsewhere than with their families?
No, I mean, that's that same sort of answer that it's impossible. We don't require them to report to us, so we don't ever know the end of the story. Yes.
I might support you on that. I worked in manage a database for outcomes for surgical procedure, and if you don't have the funding for staff to follow up these patients, you don't have follow-up data, period. If you're struggling just to be able to take care of the students that come, the people who come right on hand, you can't possibly follow them up.
Well, and there's, if you think about the shame associated with intimate partner violence, if you think about the way that we look at victims or victim blaming and the perception therein, not very often do you want to be like, here is the worst time in my life. Like this is my worst day, my worst moments when I felt the most hopeless. Let's revisit that. That's not a real expectation to have of victims. They don't owe us an explanation or an answer. And if they choose to move into a space of not sharing that story ever again, the most important thing is that we were there when they needed us. One of the quotes at the bottom is actually from one of our advocates, and it says, giving people a safe space with their basic needs being met keeps them from returning to their abuser. So that she said it to me in conversation, and I put it in my slide, and I was like, this is important. This is why this matters, is if we can if we're meeting those economic and physical, sort of those basic needs, then we can start to problem solve outside of that. And until we start to meet those basic needs for folks, they're not going to be able to think beyond that immediate crisis. So that's, I think we're like right at 10:15, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I will be here. Yes.
How's the progress on your fundraising for your new facilities going?
Our secret that's not a secret. It's like we're really good at keeping secrets and being super confidential, except around a really big building, because we need help. It is progressing. So if you would like to learn more about that sort of secret, not secret, I would strongly encourage you to put your info down. We are just past the halfway point of that project, which is very exciting. We have a goal of being 75% there when we go officially public in March of 2023. So we're progressing. It's getting there, but certainly would love to chat with folks. If you want to learn more about that project, certainly reach out to myself or Randy. He's one of our committee members of the secret committee. But yeah. We do, yeah. Absolutely. Our United Way funding provides about 1.5 staff, almost 2 full-time staff for us. So, I mean, doesn't necessarily correlate directly to them paying those salaries, but that is what that looks like. Without our United Way funding, that would mean less staff. We actually we start our internal United Way campaign on Wednesday. So as a staff, we actually have for 5 years, we've had 100% participation of our staff supporting United Way. So it's our staff giving back to the agency that gives to us.
And I'll put a big plug in for United Way. Those United Way agencies, there's approximately 30 partner agencies of our local United Way. They work very closely together, and there's no excessive use of funds because they work so closely together. As you mentioned, community and shelter house, you meet weekly. You guys are trying to use those funds as efficiently and effectively as possible.
Yeah.
Anything you can give to United Way goes directly to those partner agencies.
Yeah. So for those online, we were just talking about the United Way donations and the 30 different business nonprofits that share resources, and certainly I will say are really good with a dollar. We can stretch that dollar really, really far and impact as many lives as possible with it. So giving through United Way certainly supports our agency along with other agencies. You can also designate to DVIP, so we also can get that way. Yeah.
I have a question. Do you have, your program collaborates with the legal system in some way?
We do. So we.
That would be true for every victim or every resident that you would take in, that you would offer legal services?
So let me explain the way that it works legality wise for folks. So the question is, do we work with legal systems? Yes, we do work with law enforcement. We have what's called DART, the Domestic Assault Response Team. So we have an advocate that is partnered directly with the Iowa City Police Department to go on follow-up calls. We also, outside of Iowa City, offer their like little victim info kit type of thing. So it has the state funding number to call for crime victims assistance and all of those pieces, some resource numbers. We do not require that any victim utilize the legal system to work with us. And we do not, conversely, like we will take the referral from law enforcement or from the attorney's office and work with victims that way. We do not offer attorneys. We don't have funding to provide that at all. We can help folks find some attorneys in town that will do some pro bono work, but the truth is family law and custody is extremely expensive, and not a lot of folks can do that pro bono. We do work with Iowa Legal Aid, so it's a matter of connecting the victim survivors with resources and then trying to help them problem solve around that. But the truth is that legal stuff is very hard. We help folks with their no contact orders or temporary no contact orders, how to do those on their own. So our advocates actually work, sort of help translate the legal language for them and really talk about what that means if a no contact order is served to the perpetrator. Other questions? Feel free to go. I know we're over on time. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.